All right, and so I've been tasked with the task of providing a general overview of licensure pathways for internationally trained physicians. So I will be giving that global overview today, and I'll be speaking to you for about the next 20 minutes to do that. And then, like Thomas said, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A section, and we'll have time, lots of time afterwards to answer those questions. So, licensure pathways are complex to navigate, as we have a variety of jurisdictions across Canada to navigate, and we're here to support in that regard. So just to get started, I know many of you are AIMGA members, and that's great to see from the poll. So just a little bit about ourselves as an organization, that we are here to support all internationally trained physicians and international medical graduates to make informed choices as they embark on their career journey here in Canada. We are also I'm also involved in a variety of stakeholder meetings, both nationally and provincially, to look at foreign credential recognition, for example, and to make recommendations on how we can do a better job of integrating IMGs into our healthcare system. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. I always joke here at AIMGA that I'm not leaving until we see positive changes. And so there are some that are happening, of course, and we hope for more to come in the future. Our goal, I believe that all IMGs that are here, all of our members have such a wealth of talent and contributions and skills, and you're certainly in need, and we need to create those pathways and come up with some innovative solutions in order to deal with the healthcare crisis that we have. But just a little bit about AIMGA. So, we have over 3,000 active members at the current time. I've sort of provided a breakdown with regards to how many people are in Alberta, how many people are elsewhere across Canada, and how many people are joining AIMGA from outside of Canada. And so, we're always looking at where people are in the pathways to licensure. And so for those of you that have become members, we have a profile form that we get you to fill out and ask that you meet with one of our career advisors to determine what your pathway might be. And that information, of course, is better to gain sooner as opposed to later. And so hopefully some information, comes out of today's session that helps you in getting started. We have members from over 80 different countries and speak, or 100 different countries actually, and speak over 80 different languages. But these are our top 10 countries of origin that I thought might be of interest, as well as the top 10 specialty areas in terms of the backgrounds that our members have with regards to their area of specialization. So again, there's multiple areas there. So that's just a quick overview. We kind of look at, from an advocacy point, age range of individuals to show stakeholders that people have years of work ahead of them, have a contribution to make. And we're often interested in looking at how many people have been out of practice less than 3 years, and how many people are seeking jobs in healthcare, as all of that, are areas of interest, and showcasing the talent that we have here in this country that we can make use of. So in terms of the pathways, there are really 4 different pathways that I'm going to cover today. In order to become independent practitioners. So there's the direct entry, and there are practice readiness assessment routes across Canada. There are residency pathways in order to become licensed. And then I've added on the opportunities for IMGs to work as clinical surgical assistants or physician associate positions. That is working under a limited license, but I think that's an important one to cover as well. So in my talk, I'm going to cover all of those different areas in brief. And as well at AIMGA, we do talk about the practice readiness assessment routes and the residency pathways, as well as the limited license opportunities for IMGs, and we do monthly sessions on these areas that are much more detailed than what today is going to be. But today we'll give you an overview, and you're most welcome to attend those more detailed sessions. So in terms of getting started, so the first thing, of course, is to, if you're thinking of coming to Canada or you're already here, most likely you've had, I saw that many people are preparing for the exam. So you've done the step 1, where you verified your medical degree. There's a world directory of medical schools. And so the first step is to kind of go to that world directory, making sure that your program that you've graduated from, is in fact listed there. And if it is, then you would register with the Medical Council of Canada via Physicians Apply in order to have your medical education and training source verified. Now, it is really important that you do have, all the medical education and the training that you've had source verified. Sometimes there are individuals that, they maybe have worked as a specialist or have some specialist training, and since they're kind of pursuing general practice, for example, in Canada, where there are the majority of the opportunities, then maybe they don't get one of their training documents source verified. But in the process of becoming licensed, that actually additional training, makes you more of a competitive candidate. And so, that's why we recommend that, at some point you have all the medical education and training source verified, as it may help you later on in the pathway to licensure. So again, that would be, sort of the source verification. And then the next step, of course, is demonstrating your knowledge and skills as a physician. And so there are Canadian licensing exams, and depending on the pathway that you are pursuing or the pathways, then, that will depend on the medical exams that you are required to do. So basically every IMG, really, there's not a pathway that, all people really do need to do the MCC qualifying exam part 1. There are some cases where the qualifying exam part 1 may be waived depending on the pathway to licensure, but eventually you will need to do it at a later point in time. So I'm speaking of the practice readiness assessment route. So the qualifying exam is that broad-based exam that many of you online are preparing for now or may have done, and so you're very familiar with this exam as your sort of starting point. The NAC-OSCE exam is a performance-based exam, and it is required for IMGs who are competing for residency positions. It's also a requirement for those who are pursuing some of the practice readiness assessment pathways. So it's not a requirement for all, but it is a requirement for some. And so that might be on your agenda. For those people who are pursuing pathways, the practice readiness assessment pathways, for example, in the area of family medicine, then you will also need to do a therapeutics decision-making exam. So that is only, an exam that is required for a specific route, an area of specialization. And then, of course, there's the English language proficiency exams that are required for all pathways to licensure, including the limited licenses. And so those have been standardized across the regulatory bodies. There are French equivalents for people who are looking at Quebec as well. And so, but the IELTS academic version, the OET medicine, and CELPIP are the 3 different English language proficiency exams accepted across the regulatory bodies. So the next, so at AIMGA, like I said, we have career advisors that will go into detail with regards to your training, your work experience, and so on. But, the first step we look at is, are you from one of the approved jurisdictions? So, for family medicine, you can see that those are the jurisdictions that are listed there. For the Royal College, the list is much longer. And so we look at if you are from one of the approved jurisdictions for direct entry into practice. most of the individuals that we have as part of AIMGA haven't trained in those particular areas per se. And so then we go to the practice readiness assessment pathways. And there are 9 different programs across Canada at the current time. So these are expanding, as well as the seats are expanding in some of the provinces. So again, we're seeing increased opportunities with in this regard. But what we want to look at then is your post-medical or your postgraduate medical education. So that's your rotational based training that you did, or the specialty training. And we really want to know, okay, for some of these pathways, they'll accept, you know, a 1-year postgraduate training. Other pathways require 2 years in family medicine or general practice. And then for specialty training, if you're a specialist, there are some provinces that look at specialists as well. And we're looking at, you know, did you complete 48 months of specialty training? Did you have your, you know, did you do a national licensing type exam and become certified in that area of training? And so those are all questions that we would ask, you know, depending on the length of your training. Then we would look at, of course, you know, has your medical degree and training been source verified? Have you demonstrated the English language proficiency levels, or are you exempt? There are exemptions in some of those pathways. Again, where are you with regards to the medical examinations that you need to demonstrate, depending again on the pathways that you're looking at? And have you completed, you know, do you have independent practice or training? Again, some of the pathways will have different requirements. So for example, for Alberta, you know, international medical graduates who have just completed a residency training program could be eligible for the practice readiness assessment route. In other provinces, they want you to have a certain number of years of independent practice. And then the other thing as well is just to look at currency of practice. And so how long has it been since you've practiced independently or, you know, completed a postgraduate training program? So all of, you know, we have charts that our career advisors use. We have, you know, sort of decision-making trees based on, you know, your background experience and training. And we sort of go through this in detail to determine, you know, which PRA pathways you might be eligible for or to consider. We've had some individuals as well, you know, return to their country of origin in order to update their currency of practice or their recency of practice in order to become eligible if they had been out of practice for a certain period of time. And, you know, some pathways, for example, you don't need to be a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen. You can be under a work permit. And so, so we look at those different provinces. One thing that's important to understand about the practice readiness assessment pathways is that they still are competitive. You know, what I'd like for people to know is across the country, you know, last year there's about 500 practice readiness assessment seats that have been made available to IMGs on an annual basis. And so, so certainly that is a pathway that many people are exploring. And again, each of those programs vary across programs and provinces. And so we really need to work with you to better understand, you know, your background, training, and experience in order to determine which pathways you might be eligible for. If you're not, so just a little bit about, you know, for example, the competitiveness again. I said earlier that, you know, we want people to make informed decisions. So it's not necessarily just completing those steps that will guarantee you a practice readiness assessment seat, although again, physicians are in demand in Canada and we see these increasing. But for example, in British Columbia or Saskatchewan, they may receive over 300 applications for some of those positions. And you can see here that there's, you know, in British Columbia, there's 126 people that were accepted into their program. In Saskatchewan, you know, 47, and so on. So again, some of the seats are limited in different provinces, but so this just kind of gives you an overview of where these opportunities are at the current time. This is continuously changing and we're continuously updating this information as well. So if you're not eligible for one of the practice readiness assessment pathways for, you know, licensure, Then we look at, or sometimes people are pursuing both a practice readiness assessment route as well as residency pathways simultaneously. And so with the residency pathways, if you're not eligible for direct entry, if you're not eligible for the practice readiness assessment route, then we look at, competing for a residency seat in order to practice in Canada. So for that, again, the registration that we talked about, having your degree source verified, doing the English language proficiency exams. Many of you are in that stage at the current time. Some of you may have applied to CARMS, previously, or you're planning to apply and getting prepared, for CARMS. CARMS is the Canadian Residency Matching System for those that may not have heard of that term. And those are, the CARMS is the platform that all residents need to apply through in order to compete for a residency seat, and that goes for Canadian medical graduates as well. So everyone applies through CARMS. Alberta and BC, it's important to note that those two provinces have additional requirements and platforms where you apply in advance through that platform prior to applying to CARMS. So CARMS opens up in the fall. And I know that as an organization, we are busy helping people who are applying to CARMS for the first time and helping them navigate that system. So after applying, then, there are other assessments that are done after the medical exams and the English language proficiency exams. So once you sort of submit your application through CARMS, there are some other application or some other exams like the family medicine Pro-C exam, the mini multiple interviews, the MMIs, for example. These sometimes are assessments that are really assessing your traits, the qualities that you bring as an individual. Do you have the traits that, of course, programs are looking for in their programs and in practice? So are you trustworthy? A lot of these questions or scenarios are sort of scenario based, and how would you respond, and do you have professionalism, collegiality, so it's not your medical skills, but it's more or less the personal traits and the qualifications that you bring to medicine, which I know you all have, and so there are different ways to demonstrate that in different assessments. All residency programs begin July 1st. For those who do match in Alberta, and at the current time, applicants in Alberta do need to be an Alberta resident to apply for the positions that are allocated to IMGs at the current time. And then you also undergo an orientation and an externship prior to commencing the residency program. Once you enter a residency program, depending on whether you're in family medicine or a specialist program, then you would complete the residency program, which will range from 2 to 5 years. And then you would do the national qualifying examination either through the Canadian College of Family Physicians or the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, depending again on the specialty. Then from there, you have your national certification, and depending on where you want to practice, at the current time, you would then turn to the provincial regulatory body to qualify where you wish to practice. Now, it is important to note that at the current time, there are many return of service agreements for IMGs that they need to complete. And it's important to look at those return of service agreements carefully, but for some, there are return of service agreements post residency program in the province where you matched. So there might be questions about that at the Q&A section. I can talk about that more in detail. Again, just looking at, the competitiveness or the, match rate. I am pleased to see that from 2023 to 2024, the match rate for IMGs applying in Canada has increased. So, again, that's a result of making the second iteration. So basically, there's a first iteration, and for any seats that have not been filled, there's a second iteration and a second application through CARMS again. And across the country, second iteration has become a competitive stream, meaning that IMGs and Canadian medical graduates who haven't yet matched can apply for those positions. And so that certainly has increased the number of seats for IMGs and so on. So I just, also some of you may be looking at the USA, for example. There certainly is, this was 2023 data that we have, but in the USA, I know some of you may be competing for both, but there is a higher match rate. And then for AIMGA, last year, we did 283, well, we did more interviews, but 283 of our members were invited for a residency interview, and we had 183 matches. And so just to kind of give you a sense of the supports and services and the match rates. When we look at that 183 people, again, we can only comment on those people who have matched through AIMGA and have informed us of their, success or their match. Many people want to know, where did they match? From what area did they match? And so this slide really speaks to that. You can see, of course, there are many people in Ontario, Alberta, and so on. So there is a variety across provinces. As well, you can see the majority of seats are in the area of family medicine, but, we have many people that match to specialty areas as well. And so I think this is just to, highlight that. And of course, we'll be talking to Bess later, who's matched to pediatrics, and be hearing from her as well about her experiences. So I said that I would speak to option 4. Thomas, I'm just wondering how I'm doing for time. I'll feel free to give me a warning if needed. So there are there are options for IMGs to work, like I said, as clinical surgical assistants or physician associates. Sometimes they're known as in different provinces, and that's working under a limited license issued by the provincial regulatory body. There are positions available for individuals to work as hospitalists as well. And so we have had members, get positions in that regard, depending on the specialty area that they might be coming from. But I've pulled the data for, again, the physician clinical associates from British Columbia. I apologize that I wasn't able to get the total number from them in terms of to share with you today. But in Alberta, we have at any given time, 300 IMGs working as clinical surgical assistants. I know at the current time there's about 250 because many people, some people have matched a residency and have begun their residency program. And there's about 40 positions that are available at the current time in Alberta in different departments to work in this capacity. In Manitoba, the numbers that we have from their reports is that in 2022, for example, there were over 100 individuals working in this capacity, and I would assume that there's probably more at this point in time. But again, sometimes these numbers will fluctuate because people will be matched to residency programs and then begin those. And there are positions now being made available in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and like I said, some hospitalist positions. There are also some academic positions, which I didn't mention previously through the practice readiness assessment routes. I know in Alberta, there's about 5 or 6 people that might go through an academic route, and those are for individuals that have academic backgrounds where maybe they were involved more in teaching as opposed to clinical positions. And if they have one of the universities interested in hiring them, there are pathways for that as well. So that is the overview of the 4 different pathways. One thing that I like to, for people that are new and maybe just considering this as an opportunity, I think cost is certainly an important piece of information to know. And, just the cost of the qualifying exam, the NACOSCE, if you have to do the therapeutics decision-making exam, the English language proficiency exam, as well as the CARMS application, costs. So there certainly are costs to pursuing these pathways. And this is where Windmill comes in. I know that we recommend many of our members to reach out to Windmill, or we make direct referrals to learn more about the financial opportunities that are available so that you are able to do your exam sooner as opposed to later. We understand that people have to support themselves. They often have to support families. So there's lots of competing priorities that you have while pursuing licensure. And we do know that those people who pursue licensure sooner as opposed to later do have higher rates of success in terms of matching. But again, there's always exceptions to individuals. There are some people who have been doing something else in healthcare for 8 to 10 years, and we've seen them match to residency, for example. So again, we like to work with people individually to sort of figure out, what pathways are the pathways that are most likely to be best for you, or that you're eligible for given your current situation. There are a lot of documentation. There is documentation that is required at the time of licensure. And so sometimes that could be letters of good standing, criminal record checks, and other documents such as transcripts and whatnot that might be needed depending on which pathway, one of those 4 pathways that you are looking at. Again, I've mentioned, some of you mentioned through the poll that you wanted to become a member of AIMGA. And we're certainly, happy to have you join the organization and to support you in your pathway. And so that contact information is there. I do just want to take 1 minute to just let you know that, again, I mentioned the national committees that I have been on, and I am also part of the Foreign Credential Recognition Advisory Committee, which has been formed recently for the government of Alberta. And that is to make recommendations for the integration of IMGs into our healthcare system. So I just want to highlight that there is work that is happening behind the scenes to certainly hear from you, to, get your voices and your experiences and whatnot, and be part of some of the changes that we're likely to see in future. As like I said, there certainly is a demand for physicians and all healthcare workers at the current time. So, just a little bit about AIMGA. I did mention, the importance of a one-to-one session with an advisor so that we can fully look at, your background, education, your training. I did mention that we do have monthly orientation sessions on the residency pathways, practice readiness assessment pathways, alternative career pathways, and employment supports. And so as an organization, we have a variety of programs to really help you at every step in the process, as well as to help you if you're new to Canada, to help you get engaged with fellow IMGs, to get engaged in community, and to offer, supports through that capacity. We know sometimes the more engaged you are, again, this will have a contribution to your success, sometimes at a later point in time, depending on the pathways that you are applying for. This is not something that I will go over, but just a little description about the different, supports that we offer, and this is available on our website. So that's my presentation and the overview of sort of pathways to licensure and some of the supports and services that we offer. So at this point in time, I'm just going to stop share, and I'm going to turn it over to a conversation with Bess, if that's okay. And so it's always really nice to hear from your fellow colleagues and to understand and to understand their journeys and to learn from them. So again, I want to thank you, Bess, for joining us today, and for coming on and willing to share your story and your experiences, and any tips and advice that you have for people that are with us today. So to open up the conversation, I'm just wondering if you can sort of tell us a little bit about your background prior to coming to Canada. And maybe we'll start there.
Okay, thank you, Deidre, for the question. So prior to moving into Canada, I was born and bred in Nigeria, and I lived there all my life. Then I went to med school in Nigeria, and I graduated in 2016. And in some countries of the world, including mine, we do like a 1-year rotational internship after med school. So I did that. And I worked in general practice for about 3 to 4 years before moving into Canada. And that was chiefly outpatient, although there was some inpatient component in it, but mostly outpatient. And then I moved into like public health, HIV, tuberculosis care, which was mostly maternal and child. Maybe that was where the interest in pediatrics came from. And I did that, but I did not do any formal postgraduate training in Nigeria because I knew I was going to move to Canada. So I just didn't bother to start. And I moved to Canada during the pandemic in 2020.
Thank you. So you mentioned, I know that it was very difficult for those individuals that moved to Canada, in the pandemic time. So I'm just wondering, coming to a new country, of course, can be daunting for many people, particularly given the context and the time that you came. So I was just wondering, prior to coming, what you had heard about licensure pathways, what were your expectations, prior to coming?
Yes. The thing about Canada is there's not enough information outside of Canada about the process, even within Canada. And so when I made the decision to come to Canada and try to connect with doctors already practicing here, it was quite difficult. I didn't know anyone personally, and few people I had discussed with that started the journey or were interested in starting the journey. They got discouraged along the way, and some people I knew were in Canada but were not into practice. They told me not to even bother. There was something that stood out. Most people were using this term career suicide. So the reviews were mostly negative. I would say 98% to 2% negative to positive ratio. So that was a little bit challenging because I felt I needed to come here. And so I had to look for people I did not have direct contact with. So I had to look for success stories. I had to look for people who had the same motivation as I do. So that made me use LinkedIn to my advantage. So I went on LinkedIn looking for people in Canada who were practicing physicians. I didn't even care if they were from Nigeria or not. I just wanted one positive person. So that helped me. And that was when I got connected to different people I didn't know who were already practicing here. And then I was able to join different sessions, different webinars from back home. And with that, I got some little information that were not as much, but it was important as a starting point for me. But most of the reviews I got were negative.
Interesting. So, but you felt like you had this inner sense that you still needed to come and to attempt licensure, and obviously, you've been successful in that. Now, I know that the journey for IMGs is often not a straight path. For many, there will be ups and downs, and there's some challenges along the way. So, again, I think that what are some of the greatest challenges from your experience and those that you experienced?
Yeah, there are lots of challenges, and some of these challenges are pretty common across different people. But for me personally, I think my major challenge was like moving during a pandemic. So we know that relocation to any country is hard and is challenging, and especially when you're coming here by yourself without family members. So that was my case. And then I was coming in the pandemic, there was a lot of restrictions. And even landing, I remember landing at Toronto Pearson in November 2020, and the airport was basically empty. And I was concerned about a lot of things. How am I going to get a job? How will I pay my rent? How am I going to take my exams and resources for studying to get into licensure? And then there was also the culture shock. And then you have to prioritize your mental health. There's lack of family support. Like I said, I came here on my own. And then there are a lot of information you don't even have. There's lack of information, and then there's misinformation. And you worry about, how do I get certifications? How do I get research experience? How do I get observerships? How do I get mentorship? And then in addition to all of this, you still have the discouraging remarks from people. Some of them are well-meaning, but that's all they know. They tried it didn't work. And maybe everyone they know have also tried and they were not successful. So they're looking out for you. But so all of those were just some of the challenges that I faced, and it was a lot.
Great. And then, You know, I know that, you know, this was one of the questions that Lydia had for you before, but just, you know, if you could talk about, you know, how long it's taken you to get, you know, where you are. So you mentioned coming during the pandemic, you know, and we're just kind of curious about your particular pathway and the length of time that it took you.
Okay, so from the time when I came into Canada till now, it's been about 3 years and 8 months. But from the time I landed till when I marched into residency, it was about 17 months. So it was about 1.5 years. And I had the timeline in mind from the day I landed that I want to march in COMS 2022. So I knew I had to take everything within a year. So the QE1, the NACOSKI, the IELTS, FM Proc, and all of the certifications, BLS, ACLS, PALS, and a lot of interview prep, observership. So I had just 1 year and 1 year and a few months to do everything. So it was pretty tough for me. But it
Yeah.
was a dynamic 1.5 years because I really didn't feel it passing by because I was always doing different things. I think maybe I was sleeping like 6 to 8 hours most nights, or maybe less than 8 even. So I was just functioning on just baseline energy.
Thank you so much. That is record time. And so you must have been determined. You know, yeah, and like you said, you sort of had this idea in mind for yourself. And I always say to people, you know, we can, you know, to achieve a target, we must know what the target is and what we're aiming towards. So I'm curious to know, is there, you know, like you said, there are challenges, you know, you were here at a challenging time. You mentioned coming in November, and of course, coming from Nigeria and landing in Canada, even in November, where it's, you know, getting cold at that time, you know, you were faced with winter and in a time of isolation. So I'm just wondering, you know, is there a piece of advice that stood out for you that sort of helped you, you know, keep motivated? You've talked about, you know, sometimes people telling you that it's not worth it to even try, you know, so is there something that stood out for you that sort of helped to keep you motivated along the way?
For me, it's quite different. I think motivation for me is like inborn, so I can't stop it even if I try. I remember when I started noticing that this is a good trait and not negative, because everyone would complain about me being stubborn, right from when I was a kid. So I remember in my late teens, I attended this emotional intelligence course, and the moderator asked us to write our weaknesses on a piece of paper that we want to change and work on. And I just put stubbornness. And she asked me, well, why do you think you're stubborn? I said, everyone thinks I'm stubborn. And then she told me to give some examples, and I did. And she said, I don't think you're stubborn. I think you're tenacious. And she told me I could use that as an advantage going on in life. And it was great that I heard that advice quite early. So I was able to use that skill for good. So I'm always motivated. I really don't need any external motivation, but then to be always in that state of mind, I try to prioritize other things. So I seek for mentorship, and I always look for mentors, and that has helped me because I want to have people I'm accountable to on a time scale. And I also, I think I try to be humble. So I feel like when there is some humility, you're able to take advice and you're able to work on yourself and notice, like, you know, get positive feedback on how to use them. I'm also very flexible to changes and extremes of situations. So I think that's another trait that's helped me to be motivated. So I really don't care if, even if the tunnel looks bleak and no one has ever done it before, I'm okay with being the first person. So I work with that mindset. Like, even if I don't know anyone who's done it before, I could do it and try it and then advise people on how it is done. So, and then finally, yeah, I prioritize wellness. So coming into Canada, especially when you don't have family support, I had to look for other ways to stay mentally alert. And, you know, I made friends. I turned friends into family members. I tried new things, cuisines that I have not made before. I did sports I haven't done before. I just challenged myself. So, and it was good.
All right. And, you know, is there any sort of like you've talked about some of those attributes or characteristics that you have, personally speaking, that have sort of helped motivate you. And, I'm, based on the different things that you've tried and been doing, I'm sure they've also helped you adapt to the culture as well. So I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you would like to share, with our listeners today, in terms of any advice or things that, just things that worked for you.
Yeah, one thing I would stress is that they should seek mentors. So there are a lot of misinformation all over the place when you talk to people about the whole Canadian licensing process. It's difficult. We all know that. But there are people who have been successful. So I would advise, like for me, I came in through residency, so I don't know much about practice ready assessment, but I'd advise to seek for a mentor among maybe one of the residents in a specialty you have an interest in, and that person can guide you throughout the process. So for me, I had multiple mentors in different specialties, and I would always reach out to them. And I think that is one attribute that really helped. And I think that cuts across everyone.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned wellness. So if it's okay, one thing I'd like to share with our listeners today is I know that you not only achieved success in matching to the program of your choice in the area of pediatrics, but that you also sort of found love in Canada. And just for our listeners, Bess was recently married and had her wedding in the last 2 weeks. So we want to congratulate you for that. And beginning this new chapter in your life as well. So I'm just, kind of curious, how were you able to sort of balance your personal life with your career goals? Because I know you were sort of going at record time. So many people put their head down, we know that are preparing for exams, and sometimes it's important to recognize stress levels and know when you need to take a break and just to go out and do something fun to refresh yourself, or while you're looking at Toronto notes or something like that. So what advice do you have in that regard in terms of finding that balance?
Yes, for me, I was, I wanted that balance of like, being in a relationship. I'm very family oriented, but I was okay for that to wait. So I had to do like a scale of preference and delayed gratification on some things and then prioritize some other things. So at the time I came in, my goal was to match. So everything else was a distraction. And then after I matched, I decided to focus more on my personal life. And then I started like going out and making friends. One thing about Toronto is it's a very diverse city. It's huge. There are people from all over the world. They're very open-minded. So that was good for me. So I'm also very flexible and open-minded. So I'll go out, go hiking, go for festivals, go for concerts with people I don't even know. I joined different like groups from Meetup app, and I'll go to different events, cruising and all that. So I think in that way, I found someone, and I was able to balance that with my residency. And I think the residency process is quite easier compared to what I was doing before. So I had more time. And then I also had, my mental health was also at a good state. I was not that stressed. So I had more time to prioritize other personal things.
That's excellent, and congratulations once again. So, we had talked about the challenges and whatnot, and I'd like to kind of bring ourselves back to, what are some of the specific, supports. You had mentioned, mentorship and using LinkedIn as a tool. If you want to talk about some of the specific supports that helped you, sort of achieve your goal in the time frame that you did.
Yes, so I'm going to group them into the challenges and the support. So in terms, I think my major concern was finance. So coming in, especially with the pandemic, I needed a job because back home where I was born, you have to pay rent just once a year. But then in Canada, you have to pay bills and rent every month. So I needed to get by immediately. And then these exams, you just put the cost of all of them, they're very expensive. So I tried to come in with as much money as I could, but it wasn't enough. And it was difficult getting a job. I didn't know about Windmill before coming, but through friends and other IMGs, I heard about AIMGA, and through AIMGA, I heard about Windmill. So I planned that I was going to contact Windmill when I needed them. So I tried to get by on what I had, and I got a job immediately. So I was able to like get by on that, take some exams. And then when my contract ended, that was when I contacted Windmill. So I needed some supports for day-to-day activities, activities, and then like feeding and rent, and also to pay for my certifications. Like I did BLS, I did PLS, I did ACLS, I did IELTS, and then I was also doing like some other certifications. There was this University of Alberta Indigenous Canada course. I did some CPS courses. I did some courses from Mac Health. I did some courses from Cancer Care Ontario. So I was doing a lot of things, and I needed finances. So I contacted Windmill, and they were always swift and timely in giving me the finances that I needed. So that was a huge relief, knowing I had Windmill as a backup if I needed to. That helped me focus on my timeline and achieve things within the timeline that I planned for myself. And even after matching, I think I still contacted Windmill once because I needed to move from Calgary to Ontario. Rent here was on the high side, and just the whole process of moving again. So Windmill also supported with that. And in terms of resources for the exams, like I said, I contacted with other IMGs like me that were preparing for the exams. So I heard about AIMGA. I really didn't know about AIMGA before coming into Canada. So hearing about AIMGA and joining the first info session after I registered, it was like, I see AIMGA like my oasis in the desert. So it was really helpful. And it also helped me save some money because joining the study sessions, AIMGA, your registration already covers like U-Word materials, MCC study questions, NACA's key tutorial preparation. So having all of those resources with just that registration, I think it's good. So I joined all the sessions, key one session. I didn't moderate, but I was very active. I would try to answer every question that I could. When I fail it, I would go back and read about it. And the sessions were also good because you would also learn from your colleagues. So there are people at different levels of preparation in those classes. So for me, it was like maybe 5 months before my exam, but there were people taking their exams in about 2 or 3 weeks from the time I joined. So those people were more, they had more knowledge. So, and that can go both ways, especially with discussing with other IMGs. It can either motivate you or intimidate you. So for me, I focus more on it motivating me. So I would always think, oh, why did this person say this? Okay, I go back and I look at the results and the answer. And then sometimes even after the sessions, I will go back and play the recordings about, especially the MCC questions, the recordings about when these questions were done and how they were answered. So I was able to follow through other people's thought process to achieving the answer. And then AIMGA was also like important for my wellness. So if I hear an information that is scary, the first person I contact was Tisha Raj. So I really didn't disturb you, Deidre, much, but I think Tisha got all of my stress. So I would email Tisha for everything. Oh, I heard this. Is this true? I heard this. Is this true? Can I have a career advisor session with you tomorrow? So Tisha was nice. She would answer all my questions. She was always available. Even sometimes when I couldn't register for sessions, teacher she would send me the registration link, and then she would give me access to those sessions. So I really didn't miss any session. Even if I'm walking on the street, I'm playing a game or whatever, I have my ears always joining sessions. So I think AIMGA contributed to me having a positive mindset throughout the process. Other resources I had were ITPO. This is like the Ontario equivalent of AIMGA. So I joined some of their sessions too. And then there is the Canadian Association of Nigerian Physicians and Dentists, which is called CAMPAD. So I joined CAMPAD, and through CAMPAD, I was able to get my first observership, which I did for about 3 months. And through LinkedIn, I also connected with residents in Canada, both IMG and Canadian trained doctors, and they were able to give me a lot of resources and advice. And I think those helped. And with AIMGA, I also had linked to observerships with AIMGA, just that CAMPAD's own came faster. So I just did that. And then my second observership was purely Google. I just Googled the clinics and I got their contact and I emailed them. And I met a couple of clinics, pediatric clinics, I think about 10, 20. And then one of them responded and asked me to send my resume and to come over. And then I joined, and then I did that. I was able to get a good recommendation letter from that clinic. And I think that might have helped with or contributed to my matching.
That's fantastic. You know, I think that your tenacity has certainly served you well. And, you know, you've highlighted that, you know, that you were very active, you know, in your own sort of career path, and great that you utilize the resources and supports that were available to you at different times. So I know that, you know, Windmill has hosted this session for today, and certainly, you know, one of the important things is to understand, you know, the financial supports that are available to IMGs. And part of today, you know, we have Lidia and we have Thomas here, but I'll pass it over to Lidia to talk about, you know, the supports that Windmill does provide, because like you said, Bess, you know, you wouldn't have been able to go at the speed that you went through the process if you didn't have those supports and had to support yourself, you know, so that, you know, support certainly served you well and, you know, helped you achieve your goals. So Lidia, I'm going to pass it over to you to give us that information around Windmill and the supports that you provide. So thank you. And thank you, Bess, for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I'm sure there will be questions from our audience in the Q&A session, so more things to come.
We have received almost 70 questions, so I'll try to be very short because I really don't want us to use this Q&A part, but also I wanted to thank you, Deidre, such a great presentation, and especially your charts across Canada. And Bess, like, you need to be a mentor yourself now, and you need to be a motivational speaker. And you know, I'm very similar to you, and I always tell, like, it's not true when people tell you you cannot do it, or like it's so bad in Canada and everything, because like, again, you are this example. And again, and Deidre mentioned that so many people, they got their dream job, or they transition and talk to something else, but still they found their way in Canada, and this is the most important thing. So thank you both, and I know that we will hear more in the Q&A part, but I'll share my screen now. I'll have probably just 5 minutes to overview our program. So hopefully my screen is gonna be working here. Thomas, please let me know if you can see my screen. Just ask.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So like, well, everybody knows our name already, and here you can see that it's spelled in French. So the reason behind that same as AIMGA, Windmill is a national organization. So we help people across Canada. So, and probably you've guessed already that what we do, we provide affordable loans up to $15,000 exclusively to skilled immigrants and refugees. And sometimes when I present, a lot of people think that we are a bank. And I always tell that, no, we are not a bank. We are actually a Canadian not-for-profit charity. And we have been around for almost 20 years. Here you can see that we are funded by the government of Canada, Ontario, Alberta, and Quebec. But also, as I mentioned in the beginning, still we can work with every province and territory. So, and the story behind Windmill is a beautiful one. So it started actually in Calgary, same, I guess, like it happened with AIMGA. So it started in Calgary, but now it's everywhere. So same for us. So, and it was a doctor at a Calgary hospital, and she was so sad to see that a lot of janitors and cleaners there, back at home, they were nurses and doctors. So she gathered a lot of people in Calgary and some organizations, and they started 5 loans for those people who worked at that hospital. And then they passed their exams, they got their credentials back, and then they became doctors and nurses at the same clinic. So, but since then, Windmill actually has helped more than 11,000 people to achieve their career success in Canada. Just to show you what makes us unique and how we are different from a financial institution. So first of all, we don't require you to have Canadian credit history, but understand me right. If you've been in Canada, we are gonna check if you have your credit in Canada, but let's say if you are just landed, and let's say you're same as Bess, you are motivated and you want to start all things like just running. So then we don't need you to have Canadian accredited history. With us, actually, like, you can build one. And same idea here, we don't ask you to have a stable income or to have a stable job, because we understand that you are new to Canada, you can live off your savings, that maybe you're already on some government support available to you. And of course, we don't ask you for any asset to secure a loan or have a cosigner on your application. And just to show you how our microloans can be used, of course, the first part, like, they can be used for foreign credential recognition, exactly what Deidre and Bess described. So exams cost a lot of money, and also not just exams, but let's say if you need textbooks. Like last year, I attended an event at AIMGA, and I met a girl also from Nigeria, also very experienced and motivated, and she had her 1 year old with her at that event. So I asked her, like, so you have your child with you, how are you preparing for your exams? And she told me, well, like, I put some TV. And I said, like, not to judge, but like, have you heard about us? Because we can cover your living allowances while you're preparing for your exams. So we can pay for your childcare, we can pay for your groceries and rent as soon as it's related to your education and you are ready to pass most difficult exams probably. So also we can cover your career change. I know at AIMGA, they have the whole program for a transition for international medical graduates. So, and let's say if you decide to take a program in Alberta or Ontario or any province or territory, then again, like, we can help you with that. Like, we can cover the tuition fees, but also we can cover everything related to your education. So the third thing here is professional development. So professional development applies for those that maybe even for Bess in the future, she would like, as I know she loves to learn. And let's say if she decides to take some classes or some programs, again, like, we can help her with that. And the last thing here is allocation for employment, exactly what Bess mentioned, that she had to relocate like from one city to another. So let's say if you are now in Calgary, but then you get your spot somewhere outside of Calgary, so it can be any province in Canada or territory, then to relocate, that might be very expensive. So we can help you with those fees. And you know, sometimes like some countries, especially those who don't have Canadian, similar to Canadian credit score, when people come from those countries to Canada, sometimes they don't understand why they need a loan. And it's exactly, again, what Deidre mentioned, and Bess showed her example. So the gray part show what might happen if you don't get to your profession pretty soon. So if you decide to save money, so then it might take you much longer actually to get to your profession, start a new one in Canada and make more money. But the green part shows what might has happened to Bess and can happen to you as well. So first 2 years, if you concentrate on your exam, if you concentrate on your career education, then you might get like a better job much earlier, and you will start like making more money. And just to show you, same as AIMGA, we are very data-driven organization, and we have a lot of success stories very similar to Bess, and I believe that we will use Bess' story in the future if she doesn't mind. And we would like to have her picture here as well, so just about like how she achieved her career success in Canada. And here you can see that our repayment rate has been around like 95%. So despite that we don't ask for Canadian credit history, we don't ask for a stable income or for a stable job, still our clients, they have paid us back or they have been paying us back. And we have the solid data that they increase their income more than 3 times. And it happens in a very understandable way. So first they start with low paid jobs, but then again, they can get their credentials back or they can get into a new career. And of course, like, they can make more money. And just like a couple of slides left, and probably the most important one you're curious about. So of course, because we are We are providing affordable loans. We do have an interest rate. So we're very similar to any student loan, just we are more flexible. So by flexibility, I mean that, again, we can cover a lot of things a government student loan won't cover. So our interest rate is fixed today, and it's 6.7%. So it's exactly the same as the prime rate of Canada. Our typical repayment term is usually like from 3 to 5 years. Again, it will depend on every individual. So if you take just exams and then some time to prepare for that exams, your repayment term might be up to 3 years or 4 years. If you take a program which is 2 years because you're transitioning to a new career, then you might have up to 5 years to pay us back. Also, we have an open loan policy. It means you can pay us off at any time with no penalties or administrative fees. Of course, we don't charge you any administrative fees when you apply. And also, similar to a government student loan, we have a grace period. Grace period means that while you're preparing for your exams or while you're in your program, you can opt out to pay the interest only. So the payments will be relatively small. And after that, you also have, you will have 3 months to find a job or like your spot, and you still will be on a grace period. And after that, we will ask you to pay the principal plus the interest back. And also the last line here, you can see that you don't need to take the maximum amount of 15,000. Like you can take like a small amount just to pay for your first exam or for your textbooks or maybe for your daycare. And then additional money can be taken just up to 15,000. Just to show you our eligibility criteria quickly. So first of all, you have to be in Canada. Unfortunately, you cannot apply outside of Canada. Also, you need to have a permanent status. You need to be a permanent resident, Canadian citizen, provincial nominee, protected person, or conviction refugee. If you're on a work permit now, unfortunately, you won't be eligible unless you received your provincial nominee. When you receive that nominee, then you become eligible. And of course, we ask you to be internationally trained, meaning you need to have some education at which you obtained abroad, or at least 1 year of work experience, which is shown on your resume. And just the last slide here, of course, to show you how you can apply for our program. We will ask you to use this link. And again, Thomas will share all of the links for AIMGA, for Windmill in the follow-up email, but also here in the chat box. But also you can email us at this email address. And if you put in the subject line, I'm just webinar, that would be great because it will show us how many people actually were interested from the webinar. And when you apply, and even before you apply for a loan, you will see our loan calculator where you can see all of the payments, all of the terms. And when you feel comfortable, then you can apply for our loan. But again, as I mentioned, we have a lot of questions, so I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'll ask Thomas to walk us through, I don't know, 70 or 75 questions now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lidia. Thank you, Deidre, and thank you, Bess. It's been a really amazing session, and we can tell that by the number of questions that we have. We will try our best to go through as many questions as we can. We are already replying some of the questions by typing. But there's some questions that we will take live, which would benefit the entire group. And we'll group some of the questions because they are pretty similar, right? Now, one of the questions that we have, let me just, so someone is asking, I'm a radiologist, and notice that there's no radiologist on the matching slide. And that's pretty similar to someone else who is asking if the program covers laboratory technologies. So I would have Deidre answer that, please.
So, there certainly we have a need for radiologists. And again, it would depend on the length of training that individual has, whether they became a certified radiologist in their country through a national examination process. So we would look at, those areas to determine, and then how long, of course, they've been out of practice, all of those kinds of things to determine whether or not they would be a candidate to either, one of those hospitalist positions, the clinical assistant positions, or the practice readiness assessment programs that do look at specialists. So there are only a few programs that do consider specialists. And in some, you may be deemed eligible, but then it may be difficult to get a sponsored position or a work position. So sometimes that can be really disappointing for people if they're deemed eligible, but then they're not able to sort of turn that into a working opportunity, which we call, sponsorship position here in Alberta. So again, being a specialist does require, accurate and up-to-date feedback. So I think it's and then there are recent changes that have happened to the per route for specialists with the Royal College of Surgeons and Specialists. So that would be something that we would look at. So it's not something I'm able to answer easily. Again, it would require a consult to really go through the training and the experience in detail.
Thank you so much. So I'll come over to you, Bess. First of all, congratulations. Someone has said that to you, and they're asking if you'll be happy to be a mentor, which is again something Lidia mentioned. But to some more serious questions, they want to know what are some of the sources for your exam preparation. So if you could respond to that.
Yes, about being a mentor. I am a mentor for a Black Physicians Association of Alberta and Black Physicians of Canada. And I don't know if AIMGA has a mentorship program. I'm also a mentor for CAMPAD. So if they have a mentorship program, I'm available to mentor one or two mentees. I also have multiple mentors myself. And in terms of resources available, like I mentioned, if you're a member of AIMGA, AIMGA pays for the subscription for UWard, MCCQ1, and then for NACOSKI, they get either residents or I think Royal College specialists from those specialties to help with NACOSKI preparation. And I think some of them were former examiners, so you're getting real good preparation for that. And that's something I can also consider doing when I have my Royal College, to prepare maybe, for example, in pediatrics. For other resources, I joined from AIMGA. I was able to get some people to form a personal study group with. And for me, I think it's more about some people have a lot of resources, but it doesn't really do much. It's not the number of resources, but how well do you know it? So I can do with just 2 resources and use them very well, and then having 5 or 6 resources, and I'm just gonna know just a little bit of each of them. So I think the most important thing is, even if you just have the UWard subscription with AIMGA, some people use Canada Q Bank and the MCCQ, want questions plus Toronto notes. I think that's okay. I think the most important thing would be to look for study partners that are really motivated. So that's the difficult part. So what most people want to do is to be comfortable with studying. So want to study with people who are comfortable with. So there is the tendency to study with people from your country or from your side of your province in your country. So because they're used to each other. That's okay, but I think that shouldn't be the only way, because it's usual to have the same kind of education style from one country as compared to another country. So if you were in a study group with people from other parts of the world, I think it's better. So for me, I was in multiple study groups and we meet at different times of the day. So some of my study group were people that were from my country, but most of what I got was from the international study group I was in. So I had people from India, Iran that I would study with, and we would help each other. Some of them were coming with a lot more knowledge and experience. And then I was coming with fluency in English, for example. So we would help each other with those study sessions. And I found that I had a different mindset. They had different ways of doing things, which worked for me. So my advice would be more about the kind of people you're studying with. And they shouldn't be really knowledgeable, just about the motivation and do you trust and care for each other.
Thank you so much, Bess. That's very valuable. So I'll come to you, Lidia. We have a couple of questions regarding the low interest loans. So I'll sort of group the questions together. What proof of documentation is needed? Is there a fixed monthly payment? Are work permit holders eligible? And does the loan affect your credit score?
Awesome. Thank you so much. You read my mind. It's what I have been trying to do, just to combine some questions. So if I'll forget something, please remind me. So what documents we require? We require your status in Canada, to see that. And of course, we will ask you about your plan. So if you come to us and you tell us, I need some money, we will need more. So you need to tell us, hey, I have registered for this exam. So that's my plan. And after that, I'm planning to buy some books. I'm planning to do so and so. So for us, this is very important that you understand why you need the money for. And also we need to be sure that this money won't become a burden for you or for your family, because we are not a bank. We are not for profit. We care for you. And we want you to succeed with us or without us through AIMGA. And also about work permits. So work permits, unfortunately, if you have not received provincial nominee approved, we won't be able to work with you now because it's a temporary status. But as soon as you are approved by any provincial nominee, then you become eligible for our loan. And we have fixed interest payments. So again, even before you apply for a loan, even now today, you can use that link. We've shared it in the chat box, and you can go to our website. You will find our loan calculator. So you can see exactly how much money you're going to be paying and how much the payments would be. And also I'd like to mention one more thing, because I saw in the beginning that a lot of you already are preparing for your exams. So if you have paid for your exams and it has been less than 6 months and you put it on your credit card with a high interest rate, still you can come to us. If you can provide us with the receipt that you paid for your exams, again, those I saw the prices, and sometimes I don't think about that, but when I saw it in Deidre's presentation, I was like, wow, that's a lot. So again, you have 6 months to resubmit with us your application and close your credit card, for example.
Okay, and there's a question about work permit being eligible.
Oh, yeah, I've said that. So if somebody doesn't have a provincial nominee approved yet, then unfortunately we won't be able to work with a work permit.
Okay, and I can add to the person who was asking about if the loan affects your credit score. I think it can affect your credit score positively if you are paying your loan on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's true. With us, you can build your credit history, but you can also, if you don't pay to us, if you ghost on us, then we will have to report to Equifax, and then it will be a record on your history. That's true.
All right, fantastic. So I'll come back to you, Deidre. A number of people have asked if they can join AIMGA from outside of Alberta or even from outside of Canada.
Yes, I know that's one of the confusing parts about our name. Prior to the pandemic, we were only serving those who resided in Alberta, but after the pandemic and making our supports and services available online, then we are now able to serve IMGs across Canada as well. Like I said, we have many people who have joined AIMGA in order to participate in the study groups that are of no cost, and those include people who are overseas. So we are open to all at the current time. I should actually give a shout out for how AIMGA is funded and how we're able to provide services for IMGs. So we are funded by the federal government of Canada, by IRCC, which is Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada. We also receive funding from ESDC, which is another federal department, from the Public Health Agency of Canada, another federal department, as well as from the provincial government in Alberta, and then some other funds for research and different things that we do. So, my job is to find dollars in order for AIMGA to continue to exist and provide the services and supports that we do. So, so we are at the current time open to both those IMGs across Canada as well as overseas.
Fantastic. And just to build on that quickly, someone has asked if an IMG is already connected with Saskatchewan IMG Support Network, can they also join the AIMGA network?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the organizations that we work collaboratively with. And so I know they often recommend, we recommend each other back and forth depending on the support. So for example, I know the IMG Saskatchewan program, has some observership opportunities for their members. And so, we may refer them to them for that element, but they may refer to AIMGA's information sessions, and I know they attend those sessions as well. So again, we work collaboratively with, different IMG serving organizations across Canada to refer people to different programs and supports. We, of course, are lucky to be a large organization supporting IMGs. So sometimes we will have programs that others may not, and vice versa. So one of our roles is to make sure that we know of the different opportunities and to refer people appropriately.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now this, just to let everybody know that the session is being recorded, and we are going to send the link to the recording to everybody, so you can refer to some of the questions after. Now there's a question here, and I think you mentioned that a bit when you were talking, Bess, about your mental health, being able to make sure that you prioritize your mental health and on the journey. So someone is asking if there's any mental health support for IMGs going through this process.
I don't know about any specific mental health support. I'm more of a preventative person, so I really didn't get to the stage where I had a mental breakdown, but I tried to prevent it as much as I could. So like I said, I was always out there. For me, I tried to learn new things. So the joy in learning something new actually helped me and tried to keep me mentally stable. So I joined like a basketball team. I joined a dodgeball team in Calgary. So every weekend, every Saturday evening, I was either playing basketball or dodgeball. And mind you, I don't know how to play any of these sports. I didn't care if I was in the losing team. All I wanted to do was play. And sometimes I would go with friends. I would go hike at Kananaskis or Banff. And hiking wasn't my thing. I hadn't hiked before, but I would just do it. And sometimes I would slow them down, but I was just enjoying the process. So I just think being free-spirited, doing things you haven't done before. I'll just try. If I go out of my house, I want to try new cuisine. If it didn't taste well, it's fine. I lose a couple of dollars, but I had that experience. So those were like the supports that I had. I didn't really use any specific mental health support. And I had a lot of friends. So.
That's great. And sorry, and quickly just to add, so I know that across Canada, if you Google, you can find some mental support for immigrants. It's not going to be specifically for IMGs, but there are a lot of organizations which are available, just not everybody's trying to find them, but you can get some services for free from those organizations.
Yes, in addition, I remember there is a Calgary Immigrant Women Association and some of those immigrant help. I remember getting some coupons for them to shop for like furniture and things like that. I'll just email them, I need some stuff. It's winter. I haven't lived in the snow before. I need to get some winter jackets. And then they'll give me like $200 coupon to go shop. So I think I had that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'll come to you, Lidia. We have an attendee who has lived in Canada for 10 years, previously had 2 jobs, but now unemployed because they are doing their recency of practice. So the question is, can I still take advantage of the loan for the QE1 exam and the NEC when taking them next year?
So if I understood right, so the person is trying to do it the first time, right?
So,
the exam.
yes.
Okay, yes. So for us, if you're an immigrant, like for example, I am a Canadian citizen, so if tomorrow I'll quit, still I can apply for a windmill loan. So like for us, it doesn't no matter if you've been in Canada 10 years or 20 years, as long as you have clear career plan and you want to challenge an exam or challenge a program at any college or university. So we are here to help.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll come back to Deidre. An attendee wants to know what pathways are available for an IMG that doesn't want to take licensure exams.
If you don't want to take the licensure exams, then unfortunately, pursuing licensure wouldn't be a possibility. So we would then look at, are there alternative careers in healthcare that person could transfer their skills and talents in that regard, or something else. But unfortunately, any country, if I go to another country and I were a physician, for example, I would have to meet the licensing requirements, which are a demonstration of one's skills and experiences. So there's not really another option unless you've done unless you're from an approved jurisdiction where your training has been deemed comparable to the Canadian medical graduate training, then, there are some exceptions, for example, with that regard. But, again, it's one of those tricky things. So in order to have a career in Canada and to pursue licensure, you need to do the licensing exams that are required in order to pursue those pathways.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I'll come to you, Bess. What are the best choices of medical jobs to take during the licensure examination period?
Yes, this is a very smart question, because those jobs can actually help you match if you use them very well and if you're tactical about it. So I tried to get clinical assistant jobs, but I was not successful. But then I did multiple observerships. So for me, I worked as a support worker, and it was at I think Calgary Ava House. So it's like addiction home, detox center. So I was able to tailor that job experience to fit the clinical practice. I explained how I was present in emergencies, because sometimes when they OD, you have to give naloxone. Sometimes you have to do chest compressions if they they pass out, or they're having a seizure, or you have to call 911 and other things. So I was able to show that as still getting some skills that are important for the residency program. And so being a clinical assistant can help if you can get a research role, like some people do, like research assistant or research coordinator role. If you can, that will also help. Even if it's a support role that you have, if you can try to make the support role as medical as possible, I think that can help. I also worked part-time as a virtual medical scribe. So when I got the job, I requested for a particular specialty, if they could, and they gave me that specialty because I knew what I wanted to do. So from the first day, I was able to, the physician I was scribing for, I introduced myself to him. I told him who I was and what my goals were and why I needed that job. So he knew, and I told him I would need this from you at the end. So I also needed to perform. So for me, it was not like just a job. I would read about the patients, and I was coming with questions. So after we finished seeing patients, I was virtual, and it would give me like 5 to 10 minutes of his time. I'd ask questions, and then he would teach me and then tell me to read things for the nurse day. So I was able to use that as positively, because the same EMR we used then is the same EMR I've been using since I started residency. And it would have been more challenging for me, especially because I had paper-based training, to just come from that into this. So that 8, 9, 10 months I did that job, it was good. I didn't even know it would be the same EMR at the time. But then during my interview, I was able to tell them, I even put it in my resume, and they said, oh, this is what we use. And I said, oh, I have experience in this. So I think those also help. So if you can work as clinical assistant, research, like medical transcription, medical scribing, I think those are positive roles.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So we've hit the time 12:30 mark here in Saskatchewan, which marks the 1 hour 30 minutes for the session. We would go a few more minutes so that we can answer some additional questions. Unfortunately, we would not be able to answer everything, but in the follow-up email, we would include links to different resources that will be useful. I see a number of people have asked how to, get registered with AIMGA and how to get in touch. So we've already put the contact details in the chat box. Doing that one more time, and we would also make sure it's included in the follow-up email. But I'll come back to you, Deidre, for just one last question. So I have a question here. Is it mandatory to have completed the postgraduate training and pass the specialty exams in my home country, or does the 48 months period qualify you to apply for the PRA route regardless of completion of specialty training?
Yes. So, unfortunately for specialists, like you do have to have, you have to have been a certified, specialist in your country of origin in order to pursue those pathways. So, some people I know have additional training, but if they didn't complete that training prior to coming to Canada and didn't become certified, then they wouldn't be considered for a specialist, here. Now they can use that training if they're applying for family medicine, for example, and have training in psychiatry or pediatrics or obstetrics and gynecology. Of course, that's where I said having the training that you have source verified is certainly valuable to you if you're applying for residency or so on. So, and having that experience on your resume will certainly help with your scope of practice and jobs that you might be applying for. But unfortunately, we've seen people have the length of training required, but then they haven't done the national certifying exam, and then therefore they've been deemed ineligible. So like I said, there are changes that are happening to these practice readiness assessment routes on a regular basis. Our job is to stay up to date with those changes. There are changes as well with the Royal College, pathways for IMGs, and we can certainly include that in the information that you send out. And I know there's lots of questions that we won't get to today, but we're happy to work together to answer those questions, post session.
All right, thank you very much. Lidia, I'll come back to you for one last question. The question is asking about the interest rate, 6.7%, if it's a compound rate or a simple rate.
I believe it's a simple rate. So the one which is much easier to pay, and like you just pay as so you pay equal amounts, and that's it. Yeah, and I'd like to add that like Bess and Deidre, like that was great. Like your stories, your experience, it was just awesome. I'd like just to add for everybody, and maybe then same Bess that we might say a few words, and Deidre, and then Thomas, you can close the session. But what I'd like to say, and I think Deidre, you mentioned that in the beginning. So when you come to Canada, your journey cannot be just smooth without any bumps. Like you will have ups and downs. And as I always tell to all fellow immigrants, you have to always be sure that you need, from those downs, you need to get to your balance line, because like that balance line will help you to navigate through your journey, and it will help you to stay healthy and mentally and physically. So please stay positive and think positive as well. And I'll pass it probably to Bess to add as well some final words, and then to Deidre, and then to Thomas. Yeah.
Yes. So for me, I think it's just to look for one person who will believe in you, even if that one person is yourself, because it's true, it's a very challenging process, and it's going to test you in levels you haven't been tested before. And most of the advice you will get will be negative. So you just have to look for one person who will believe in you, even if that person is you. And then my email is on the chat if you need to.
I just saw it. Be careful, you will be very busy.
It's okay. It's an email I can choose to access anytime.
Thank you so much. Again, I want to say a very big thank you to everybody who joined. Again, we're sorry we wouldn't be able to go through all the questions, but I believe it's been a very informative session and very encouraging session as well. And we've also sort of opened a line of communication. We've provided the AIMGA contact information, the phone number and the email, and of course the website. You also have the Windmill contact information, and Bess has generously also shared her email. I know a lot of you still have some questions. It's always reassuring to see someone who has gone through the journey, who can tell you, it's fine, you can do it. And, sometimes we just need a little bit of that motivation. So on that note, we will be closing the webinar today. Thank you so, so much for joining. And once again, we will be sending a follow-up email with a lot more resources, providing all the contact informations and useful links so you can find some of the answers to some of your questions. And of course, through the contact information that we will be providing, if you need to ask any question, please feel free to send us an email. I know a lot of people have asked about, joining AIMGA. So I guess, Deidre, you're going to be a bit busy with that. But yeah, thank you so much, Deidre, Lidia, and Bess. And I wish you a happy rest of your day.
Thank you so much. And thanks for Windmill for organizing this session. And Bess, great to see you again. And we can certainly have you as part of our mentorship program in future if you want to talk to a group of individuals again. And I know Windmill has mentorship as well. So we might want to do this all over again. All right. And thank you. Thank you, Thomas, for moderating that Q&A session.
Yeah, it was a lot. Thank you so much once again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Bye.